Yeah, really. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Rick Tate, chairman of the Pickens County Republican Party, and with us tonight is chairman of the SCGOP, Drew McKissick. Just so you folks don't think we skipped over it, we've already done the prayer and the pledge, and we're ready for Drew. We had a glitch in the camera, just now got it up and running. So without further ado, Drew McKissick, chairman of the South Carolina Republican Party.
Well, thank you, Rick. Again, appreciate that. And again, appreciate all that y'all do for the party. Those of you who volunteer and put in the time, again, we can't have political organizations without people, and y'all make it go, and we sincerely appreciate it. So wanted to spend a little bit of time this evening talking a little bit about the last election cycle and with three particular points in mind. What happened this past election, why it happened, how it happened, and then why it happened. The what, the how, and the why of this last election cycle. Of course, y'all are all here this evening because you know this stuff matters. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here wasting time. Somebody, you could be home, watching Dancing with the Stars or whatever it may be, and, whatever you've gotten hooked on whenever everybody was in for lockdowns with coronavirus or whatever. But, you're turning out this evening and you've been involved in party activity because you do understand this stuff does matter. Particularly, and as I was talking earlier with someone about this, the local aspect of it. Where most of your tax dollars spent, actually. They're spent, locally. It is the, unfortunately, level of politics that people seem to have the least interest in many cases. We swim in what I refer to as national media. Everything is consumed with what's going on nationally in Washington, D.C. And you've got so much going on here in your own state and here in your local area that many times we're just unaware of. And, what we don't know about, we can't have an impact on. And that's why it's so important to get folks involved in the Republican Party, and I appreciate all that y'all do to help make that happen. So, again, thinking about the what and the how and the why from this last election cycle. First off, what happened? Well, we had here in South Carolina the single biggest Republican turnout in the history of South Carolina. We delivered more votes for a presidential nominee than anyone ever has in the history of South Carolina, which is what we delivered for Donald Trump. Y'all helped be a part of that, so that deserves a round of applause, y'all. Thank y'all for everything that y'all did there to help make that happen. Not only that, but we had the most Republican wins in the history of South Carolina. All up and down the ballot and across the state. We had Democrats were sort of strutting around the state here for a while with Jamie Harrison talking about everything they were going to win. And when it was all said and done, the blue wave didn't materialize here in South Carolina. Instead, we had a red wave hit the coast, and it came all the way up to the upstate. And we won stuff we wasn't even expecting to be able to win in this last cycle. But again, starting with the presidential race, the record number of votes we delivered there, re-electing Senator Graham by more than double digits, winning back the 1st Congressional District from a Democrat incumbent down there in the Charleston area especially, all the way from there, Charleston down to Beaufort. Being able to win that back, winning the biggest Republican majority in the state Senate and the state House in over 140 years, period. We've got votes now that we can get things done, especially over on the Senate side. And I know Senator Rice back here can attest to how much more useful it is to have those 3 extra Republicans, especially when it comes to the fact that we've got to have, 26 votes to overcome cloture and actually move things along. Very, very helpful to us. We had, I believe it was 6 sheriff's races that we picked up around the state. We lost 1, picked up 6, so a net of 5 sheriff's races. And again, going back to the local politics, for those of you who pay attention, one of the quickest ways to make progress in local politics is picking up a sheriff's race. Because people vote locally on sheriff before they'll get them interested in just about anything else because of, it touches everybody. Law enforcement, protecting your person and your property. One quick example, I know with, was it 8 years ago when we flipped the sheriff's race in Lancaster County. And from there, it was just a domino effect for the rest of the courthouse. We retired the last Democrat. Actually, the last Democrat switched parties in Lancaster County, countywide Democrat. He's the clerk of court a year and a half ago. They got no more countywide elected Democrats in Lancaster County. And in this past election, we knocked off the last Democrat standing in Lancaster County. It was Mandy Powers Norrell, the Democrats' last lieutenant governor nominee from the 18 cycle. Knocked her out of that House seat, actually with our county party chairman, Rick. So there's hope for you yet. You know, you may be able to win a state House seat one day. But we're able to pick up that state House seat in addition to a state House seat in Camden over in Kershaw County against another Democrat incumbent there. Picked up 2 state House seats and 3 state Senate seats again. Biggest majorities we've had in the legislature in 140 years, so it's fantastic. We carried 34 out of 46 counties statewide. Y'all are in the neck of the woods here where things are a little bit more, Republican, thankfully, and have been for a while. But we've got counties like Chesterfield County, Chester County, Jasper County, where we haven't won a countywide race in 140 years that we won countywide in this last election. We picked up a clerk of court in Chesterfield, picked up countywide, it's a county councilman at large, I believe it is, down in Jasper County, county council majorities in Newberry County and so forth, all over the place, up and down the ballot. It was incredible. And what made it happen was, in my opinion, largely due to straight ticket voting. So in this past, let me back up to 2016, with Donald Trump on top of the ticket, was the first time in history we ever beat Democrats on straight ticket voting. We beat them by 2.5 points. Fast forward to 2018, in the governor's race, we beat them by 8 points on straight ticket voting. And in this last election, in November, we beat them by 17 points on straight ticket voting statewide. And that trickled all the way down the ballot, and that helped carry people in county council races. That helped elect those sheriffs. That helped in our clerk of courts races and so forth, and then these state house races we just talked about. And I think we could probably even chalk up a state senate race or two potentially to that straight ticket voting, carrying those candidates across the line. And that was due to the effort that folks like you put in statewide in terms of the volunteer activity, and that helped make it happen. I sincerely appreciate what you did. And just to give you a little sense of perspective of how much that straight ticket voting helps our candidates, I think it was 45,000 people voted a straight Republican ballot in South Carolina in this past election. Donald Trump, I think it was 1.36 million votes or something like that is what he received. So when you do that math, that means that about 68% of all the Republican votes that got cast were straight ticket voters. That is a tremendous help to our down ballot candidates in many cases who don't have money or don't have organization. They've just, they're strapped and they're working as hard as they can. To be able to get on the Republican ticket and be able to ride those ticket coattails is a tremendous boon to those candidates, and that helps us out in a great way. And keep in mind, all of this is happening against the backdrop of the Democrat, financial tsunami that we saw hit South Carolina. To give you a sense of perspective, the most money that any statewide Democrat has ever spent in South Carolina was Inez Tenenbaum, and this was about close to 20 years ago now, spent $6.5 million. $6.5 million. In this past election, Jamie Harrison alone raised and spent $130 million in South Carolina. Now, you wonder why you weren't able to turn on TV without seeing a Jamie Harrison ad? That's why. You want to know why, George Sink couldn't get any more TV time, or Akeem Anastapullo or whatever? They were having to pay double for their ads, in some places, especially down in Charleston because of that congressional race. But $130 million, and that was, or on top of that, you had the Democrat committees spend, I think, about $30 to $35 million extra. So you're looking at about $150 million plus that got spent by the Democrats here in South Carolina. Just an unheard of, unfathomable amount of money, especially as we started this campaign out, in the spring and going forward, as we begin to plan what we were going to do and how we're going to adjust our the organizational effort we would invest in and so forth. $130 million. And at the end of the day, he got, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Hope, I think 1/2 point better than the last person who ran for a U.S. Senate race on the Democrat ballot in South Carolina. So what does $130 million get you? It gets you 1/2 point better if you're a Democrat statewide. What's that, 44? Yeah, 44%, exactly. Which is about a 1/2 point better than they did last time, which is incredible. So what you ended up hearing, just to paraphrase Ross Perot from back in the day, that giant sucking sound you heard was 130 million Democrat dollars being flushed down a toilet in South Carolina instead of doing them good in some state elsewhere where they might have had a chance. So, as big of a headache as it was for us to oppose it, I just assume have them waste all their money right here instead of spending it somewhere else where it would actually do them some good. So it was a monumental task, but we had a great operation, and that gets me around to the how. That's what happened. How did we actually win, though? How did we achieve those results? Two main things. Number one, we defended existing election law here in South Carolina. There were, I believe, 27 states, I think that's right, where Democrats brought federal and state lawsuits against existing election law. Here in South Carolina, they sued the State Election Commission. There was 2 federal lawsuits and 1 state lawsuit in the state Supreme Court. Within, I think it was about 36 hours, we had our attorneys file to intervene in all 3 of those cases. And we were successfully admitted to them. And we were able to be there and defend the Republican position of defending state election law in federal court. And when Democrats were suing for what I call the buffet table of ways to make fraud easier. That's basically what they were looking for. They wanted, drop boxes. They wanted ballot harvesting. They wanted to be able to receive absentee ballots all the way up to Friday. They wanted, it was just a buffet of things that would have made the election less secure. We fought back against that, got into federal court. And when it was all said and done, we were successful on each and every point that they had brought against the state, except for one. We lost on one to begin with, and that was the witness signature on mail-in absentee ballots. They argued that it would put people at risk, that your life could be in danger if you had to have someone get close enough to you to witness an absentee ballot. So that's Democrats' idea of election security. Now, we're going to die if somebody has to witness your absentee ballot. So we appealed that to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. We initially won in the 3-judge panel in the Fourth Circuit. And then an interesting thing happened. The losing judge, it was a 2-1 decision, the losing judge on that initial hearing didn't wait for the Democrats to appeal their case. He essentially appealed it for them to the full Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which unfortunately at this point had been filled with a lot of, Trump's been able to put a few judges on there, but it's still a majority, I believe, of Obama Democrat appointees. And we lost on the Fourth Circuit, so we appealed it to the U.S. Supreme Court. Justice Roberts, it was his turn to oversee the Fourth Circuit, and he agreed to take the case for the Supreme Court. And at the end of the day, we got a 5-0 ruling out of the Supreme Court, which was interesting because, at this point, Ruth Bader Ginsburg had passed on. There were 8 judges on the court, 5 conservatives and 3 liberals, ostensibly. And the 3 liberals decided not to file an opinion. So it was a 5-0 opinion, which essentially then just establishes a precedent, if you will, that it is constitutional for a state government to require a witness signature on an absentee ballot. And we were able to secure that. So the point is, we stood up for existing election law, where Democrats were trying to sue and make changes, especially in the middle of the game. And they did and were successful in several other states. And that was part of the problem that we saw in other states nationwide. Pennsylvania, for instance, you had bureaucrats step in and say, well, I know the state says that you can take ballots, or you have to stop taking ballots in the mail at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, but we're going to take them up until Friday. Well, the Constitution says state legislatures are supposed to make election law. And the Republicans and, whoever was in charge of the election system in Pennsylvania did not fight back quick enough. They eventually did. They did get into court eventually, but the problem was by the time they got their appeal before the U.S. Supreme Court, people had already been voting for 7 days. So the Supreme Court throws up its hands and says, we can't change the rules now. People are already voting. They didn't fight back, and they didn't fight back early enough. Over in Georgia, the Secretary of State runs the elections over there. and he was the one that they sued. And you had a situation where I think about halfway through the case, he signed a consent decree and essentially gave them half of what they wanted if they just dropped the lawsuit on the other half. So again, not standing up for existing election law, and that gave them the edge that they needed, in my opinion, to help flip Georgia, quite frankly. Bottom line is, state legislatures are supposed to make election law, and we got to stand up for that, period. And we did here in South Carolina, and we were successful. That was number one, in my opinion, of how we were able to get the result that we got. Number two, we had the biggest ground game in the history of the South Carolina Republican Party by a factor of 5. 5 times bigger than anything we've ever done in the past. All told, we had, I think it was 10 regional victory offices around the state. We had about 300 employees around the state, either part-time or full-time. About 260, I believe, of which were door knockers. So throughout the course of the campaign, they were able to knock on over 600,000 doors. We paid to knock on 600,000 doors. That's not counting volunteer doors that you may have knocked, that candidates knocked, that their campaigns knocked, what the state Republican Party wrote a check to pay for. We paid for 600,000 door knocks around the state. About 230 or 40,000 of them, I believe, were down in the 1st Congressional District to help take that seat back. And at the end of the day, we won that seat, I think, was it 6,500 votes or something like that, whereas we lost it in the previous cycle by a little over 3,000 votes. So successfully flipping that seat back, but just a massive, massive grassroots ground game effort. In addition to the door knocks, those folks made 1.5 million phone calls. And I'm not talking robocalls. I'm talking live on the phone, calling somebody and talking to them. 1.5 million calls, 4 million texts they sent, just pressing the send button on their phone.
I got 3 million of them.
You got 3 million of them? Those were the fundraising texts. We were not responsible for the fundraising text. That was a national party. They did that. 4 million texts. We did 10 million pieces of mail. A huge chunk of it was absentee mail to get the absentee voters out. For those who, because again, the legislature had said because of coronavirus, everybody could vote mail-in absentee. So that was going to be the rules of the road. So we invested a huge chunk in actually making sure that identified Republicans who repeatedly vote in elections, I forget what metric we might have used for that, but it might have varied across the state, that they got a piece of mail encouraging them to sign up to get an absentee ballot in the mail. And then for those that weren't doing that, we were coming back around to get them to go vote early absentee in person. And then we did the chase calls for Election Day. TV and digital, radio, all that, you saw all of that all over the state. Bottom line, this group that we put together contacted our targeted voters, our targeted universe of voters that we put together, these are the people we need to turn out in order to win. We contacted those people anywhere from 3 to 6 times a piece in order to turn them out. And that's how we got them out. Again, biggest turnout we've had in the history of the Republican Party. And having the ground game to get it done was just absolutely tremendous. So that was the how. And then I get to the why. Why was that able to happen? It's one thing to have the people to do something and even to have the money to pay for it. But why was it successful? And I come back to a couple things. You go back to fundamentals, and many of you have heard me talk about this a lot. Politics is about fundamentals. There are certain things that only the party can do, and those are the things we need to spend our time doing. And there are 3 key fundamentals, and that's, your message. What are we saying, and how are we saying it? Are we saying it in a way that brings people into our party, makes them want to vote for our candidates? 2 is the organization, the manpower we put together to identify our voters and turn them out. And then 3, raising the money to make number 1 and number 2 happen. Period. That's it. It's very simple. Everything that we do during the course of the day ought to revolve around one of those 3 things if we're doing our job. And so we focused on fundamentals. But the motivation is the key. Why were the people who turned out motivated to turn out? And for me, that's where you get back down to the issues. So, we had the growth that we've seen in this state in the Republican Party in the last 4 years because of President Trump has been absolutely phenomenal, quite frankly. When I first got elected chairman, for instance, we didn't have a Republican Party. We didn't even have an individual willing to put the hat on and be chairman, much less anybody else, for instance, in Marlborough County. For those of you, I'm sure anybody not know where Marlboro County is, and if you're coming down I-95 and you pass Pedro off over to the right that way, a little way, that's Marlboro County. Nobody. A year and a half after Donald Trump is sworn in as president, we have 42 people turn out in Bennettsville, South Carolina to organize the Republican Party. Came out of the woodwork. We saw that in other places around the state and increased crowds. And as we come forward to the election, people were excited, number one, about the issues, obviously, that the president began to talk about that had been ignored for so many years. And the enthusiasm that they brought to the party was I guess I would say infectious. People like being around enthusiastic people, and that gets other people enthusiastic. Enthusiasm is a secret ingredient to actually putting together a good organization. You can get a big crowd of people together, but if they're not excited about what they're doing, they ain't going to do it. They ain't going to make phone calls. They ain't going to make knock doors, or whatever, or much less give money to make it happen. They're enthusiastic, then that's catching. And they're likely to enjoy what they're doing and do more of it and then bring somebody else with them next time. These people were enthusiastic and engaged. And the best example I could give about that was the what I called the organic activity that we saw grow up in this last election cycle. Stuff that wasn't even organized by the campaign. People would put together rallies, and you saw the boat rallies, and you saw the pop-up rallies, biker rallies and stuff. And I had a phone call. Actually, I was doing a talk radio hit down in Charleston, a talk radio host down there. I do about 4 or 5 talk radio hits every week in the morning. My wife loves that. It gets her up in the morning because I'm off talking on the radio in the kitchen. And I was in the middle of a break with this talk radio host, and she asked me, she says, "You going to be coming to the Bikers for Trump rally in Latson, on such a date?" I was like, "No, I don't know anything about that." "Oh, you got to be there. Oh, it's going to be tremendous." And I'm going. I'm speaking there. Like, really? Oh, okay. Well, all right, I'll look into that. And I had a lot of other stuff going on. We had our bus tour planned, and I knew I had to be down in Beaufort, I think, on that Sunday. We're doing door knocking for 1st Congressional District candidate Nancy Mace on that Saturday morning. Had a lot going on, and so 2 days later, somebody else pings me about it. I'm like, "Can we actually work this out and get this on my schedule?" Because I was planning to take my wife down to Charleston. She didn't get to, go do very much exciting during campaign season or see that much of me. So I'm like, "Why don't we go down to Charleston? We'll spend the weekend down there because I have to do this door knocking thing on Saturday morning and got to go down to Hilton Head on Sunday afternoon for a rally." Fine. Well, it turns out this Bikers for Trump rally in Latson was at 11 a.m. on Sunday morning at the Honky Tonk Bar and Grill in Latson, South Carolina. So now usually I'm somewhere else at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, much less not being at the Honky Tonk Bar and Grill, So, all right, so I agree to go. So I get my Amy agrees to go with me, and we go, and we pull up in the parking lot about, 10 minutes till 11. And there are hundreds and hundreds of Harley Davidsons out there. There are tractor trailers with the Trump flags on the back, and, just a huge crowd of people. None of which you would ever put at a Republican Party meeting anywhere. New people. I didn't recognize, I think in the whole crowd, I recognized 2 people because one of them is the former county party chairman of the party. 2 people out of the whole crowd that I even recognized or never seen before. So I get there, and I'm looking around and thinking, does anybody here kind of look like staff or with the campaign? I need to find out where I need to be, and I don't recognize anybody. So I go walking up to the front door on the big porch area where the crowd's assembling out in front. And the big guy with the biker jacket comes up to me and looks at me and goes, "You must be Drew McKissick." Of course, I'm the only person in slacks and a button-down shirt there, so it was kind of easy for him to find me. And the crowd said, "Yeah, I am, man. Good to see you. And I'm so glad you came here. We're just getting everybody organized. I'm going to walk up and make an announcement in a minute." And about 2 minutes later, he grabs a microphone, he goes up, and he starts announcing who was coming. They had the congressional candidate, Nancy Mace. Well, she's going to be here, and I got the talk radio host from the local talk radio station is going to be here, and Drew McKissick, the chairman of the National Republican Party, is here, and he's going to speak to y'all. And by the way, y'all don't forget, come back on Tuesday night, because Tuesday night's midget wrestling night, so y'all be sure you're going to be back here on Tuesday. I'm looking around, and thinking, "Man, is anybody else here I know?" They're recording this. But those people were enthusiastic. They were engaged. They were excited. And it was infectious, and those people worked. Those people knocked on doors. Those people made phone calls. And want to look around and see why our party grew and why we were able to win races we didn't think we were going to win all around the state, because of people like that came into this party. And the thing that we need to do, our challenge, our goal, is to keep those people involved. Remember, politics, again, is spelled P-E-O-P-L-E, and it's about addition and multiplication. It ain't about subtraction. It ain't about division. We leave that to the Democrats. Our job is adding and multiplying. And for the last 4 years, we've been doing that. If we continue to do that, continue to bring those folks in, continue to stick with the issues that brought that crowd there and brought them to the table and got them excited, then we will continue to grow. And if we continue to grow, we'll continue to win elections all around the state and continue to beat Democrats all up and down the ballot. So again, thank y'all for what y'all have done. Y'all have been a part of the most successful Republican election in the history of South Carolina. Give yourself a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Would you be willing to take a question or two?
Absolutely.
Well, I got the first one. And I've got a picture right here of you standing at the last executive committee meeting with a legislative agenda behind you.
Yes, sir.
And I think a lot of people would be surprised to know how much time you and Hope and your interns and personnel spend over at the State House walking those halls trying to get legislation passed.
Absolutely.
Would you like to tell these folks who walked the halls for the heartbeat bill, how much work you guys put into it?
We put in an awful lot of work to get the heartbeat bill passed. And, you know, we've been working on that for several years. And as, you know, Senator Rice can attest, you know, ran into roadblocks over in the Senate because of that cloture rule that I mentioned earlier. And now having 3 new conservative members of the Senate, you know, we thought we had a good chance. You know, let's take that new majority for a test drive now. Let's see what we can get accomplished. We worked together with the leaders of the other conservative pro-family organizations around the state, South Carolina Citizens for Life, the Baptist Convention, the Catholic Diocese, the Family Council, Concerned Women for America, and several of them, to make sure that we could all get everybody on the same page, the same strategy in order to move it forward, because, again, the Senate was key. We know whatever we could get through the Senate, we know we could get through the House. You know, the Senate is sort of the, I don't want to call it the bottleneck, Senator. I'm not. Is it okay to call it the bottleneck? All right. But that was the key, and we spent probably the better part of about 6 weeks working on that with those groups, working with leadership in the House and the Senate to make sure we could do what we could do to get it moved forward.
And I believe you told me that one of our state House representatives here from Pickens County, Representative Davey Hyatt, was very helpful to you with that.
Extremely helpful. Extremely helpful. And, you know, and I know he was, the speaker leaned on him a lot in terms of moving that forward, too, in terms of actually when it hit the floor of the House, as a matter of fact.
We like to, when our people do something good, we like to give them the pat on the back.
They get enough of the complaints, but when they do right, they need to hear about it. You're right. And Davey was incredibly helpful.
Well, I just think it was surprising to me when I got involved with the party how much you guys try to do and do accomplish getting legislation through. And on you've got a list here that you put up at the EC meeting.
Yep.
Heartbeat. There's a list of their priorities for legislation, and at the top of the list was a heartbeat bill, and then the 4 big ones after that. There's about 10 on the list, but the 4 main ones you've got up there are school choice, Second Amendment, and election law and ballot reform. Correct. Anything you'd like to say on those 3?
Yeah, so specifically I want to just briefly about election law reform, because, you know, I know, and again, not because we had a bad experience here in South Carolina, but it is heavy on the minds of a lot of folks right now because of what happened in other states, quite frankly. But just because we didn't have a bad experience in South Carolina doesn't mean we can't tighten up our existing laws and use the heightened sense of awareness that everybody has about election law right now to get that done. So that's what we're working to do. We've got actually 2 former county party chairmen who are actually members of the House right now are working with us and have legislation that is a few bills that have been introduced, but then a couple I think are probably going to get dropped next week, as a matter of fact, which we will be pushing very, very vigorously, to put it mildly. You know, we've got a good opportunity now to get this done. And just last week, you know, I was appointed to the RNC's Ballot Integrity Committee, the national chairman. She put together a committee of a little over 20 people from around the country, basically to do a couple things. One, to look at what went right, look at what went wrong in the various different states, come together to put together suggestions around that, and then sit down and work with the National Republican Legislative Committee to draft model legislation, which they will then go take to the states where we had the problems. And the RNC, for the first time, will be spending millions of dollars itself on lobbying campaigns to get that legislation passed.
That was one of the things that jumped out at me at the last executive committee meeting, that the RNC is going to get involved with the state legislative committee that
Correct.
they have and put money behind it,
Yep.
so that the Republican Party will be doing what the Democrat Party did
Right.
the last go-around, and be fighting in court for the integrity of our election.
In addition, and that goes to the other issue right there. The other thing that they're doing at the national party's doing is essentially duplicating what the Democrats have done with outside legal entities that they have come to raise money to essentially have sued Republicans and elected officials and election commissions all around the country. So the idea is they're going to raise money to do the same thing. It won't be done by the RNC itself. It'll have to be legally. It has to be an outside entity. But essentially, they just push all their RNC donors over to this entity, give these guys money because they're going to spend their time suing Democrats all over the country when it comes to election law.
One last thing for me, and I'll shut up and pass the microphone, I promise. Would it be fair to say that the South Carolina Republican Party is the party of Donald Trump, and we support the MAGA
Absolutely.
program, Make America Great Again?
Absolutely, 100%. 100%.
Absolutely, and I've read in places where we've been accused of being establishment. Anybody that's ever been to a Republican Party executive committee meeting and walk in there with those people from across the state, good Lord, that's about the most there's not a establishment type person in the room. I've never met them, and I've been to a bunch of these meetings. But anyway, that's me. I'm proud to be in the room with you guys down there, and I'm proud of everything you did. And I don't know any conservative. I'll say this and I'll shut up and pass the mic. I swear. Just about every conservative I've ever met supports and loves our party platform, the South Carolina State platform. The people that are those people in that room in that executive committee, those are the people that wrote it.
That's right.
Those are the
That's
people
right.
that wrote it. And I get frustrated when people get the Republican Party, us, confused with Mitch McConnell.
Correct.
Mitch McConnell does not speak for us.
Correct. Well, look, and to that point, there is, and again, it's because so many people obviously spend all their time swimming in national media, as I put it. There is obviously, folks in this room know there's a difference between the state Republican Party and the Pickens County Republican Party and the Republican National Committee and the National Republican Senatorial Committee and the National Republican Congressional Committee and the National Republican Legislative Committee, much less Mitch McConnell's office or any other individual elected officials. And it's all an alphabet soup for most people, and it's all just the Republican Party. Look, in my opinion, I can't do anything, and quite frankly, we would beat our head against the wall trying to do something about changing everybody's perceptions about that because, again, everybody swims in national media. What we can do is spend our time trying to affirmatively make a difference on the things that we can do at our level of the party, because then people who live where we live are going to see that and they're going to take notice. What are we doing as a party to actually be relevant to what people care about? If we're relevant to what they care about, they're going to show up and they're going to get involved and they're going to appreciate it.
Thank you, Drew.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm going to hit Alan, then I'll come to you, Roger. Mr. Alan Quinn from Easley, South Carolina.
Yes, sir.
I was going to say that. Welcome, Drew and Hope.
Thank you,
I
sir.
appreciate y'all coming up here. I appreciate your support of the Heartbeat Bill. Rex Rice was instrumental in that. Yep. Now, he's got two more coming up. And one of them is Second Amendment Sanctuary Bill for the state.
Yep.
And we hope you guys are going to get behind that
Yep.
to help us.
Yes, sir.
Carl Hudson was on our county council, and he was instrumental on getting it for Pickens County. We were the third county in the state to get Sanctuary County. And we'd like to see that statewide.
Yep.
The other one that Rick made reference to was closed primaries.
right?
It's time.
Yep.
Yep.
So I know Senator Rice has a bill along those lines.
He's got
Again.
that bill
Yep.
also.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we hope that you guys are going to get behind that.
Yep.
We need support for both these bills.
Yep.
We want to thank you for censoring Tom Rice for not wanting to impeach our President Trump. And I think all the people down there voted for that except Elliott Kelly. And that's our guy, and he abstained from it. So
right.
We appreciate that. And reorganization. Mm-hmm. That's what I want. This is my question.
Right.
We've got a splinter group from over in Greenville that are wanting to go out and disrupt and divide the Republican Party. Instead of unifying. We need to be unified right now. And I feel like that's what they're doing. And they even use SCGOP. Now, they put a little MY in front of it, my SCGOP. But to me, that's just being dishonest. And instead of them trying to disrupt the party, I think they should be trying to unify it. And the liberals do that. You know, they unify behind it, and that's why sometimes they win elections. I don't really think they won the last one, but anyway, just your thoughts on that.
Well, I can go back to what I said a few minutes ago. Successful electoral politics is about addition and multiplication, not about subtraction, not about division. We are about adding people. We are about bringing in those new folks and continuing to keep out the welcome mat for those new folks who've come in, because not only do we want them to be, Republican voters, which I think as you look at those straight ticket numbers that I talked about, by the way, winning by 2.5 points, winning by 8 points, and then by 17 points on straight ticket voting, that tells me that those new folks who've been coming into the party because of Donald Trump are now thinking of themselves as Republicans. And that's where we've been making great headway. And our challenge is to continue to make headway with those folks. Division and subtraction ain't going to get it done. And I'm about, let's go forward the way we've been going forward. I got a lot of questions from the national media and other folks after the election was over. And so much so that it really kind of got on my nerves because they all started out the very same way. It was like Boston Globe, New York Times, Washington Post, you name it. And it was all, well, where does the Republican Party go from here? What's the GOP do now? Because we lost, at the national level. Well, the bottom line is, I look around at what happened here in South Carolina. You want to know the answer to where we go? Well, we continue to do what we've been doing. That's how we've grown. That's how we've built the local organizations that we built. That's how we turned out a record number of people statewide, delivered the most votes ever for a presidential candidate, winning the biggest majorities we've had in 140 years. We would be absolutely insane to do something different. So we continue to do that and go forward and add those people and then hopefully multiply because of their enthusiasm. And then speaking real quickly to your point about the partisan registration, absolutely. I've always been an advocate of that, as Rick attested to earlier, the conversations he and I had. There are, and Senator Rice might be able to help me with this, but out of the whole country, there are maybe, 10 different ways that states will do this in different fashions. Either they have completely closed primaries, they enforce partisan registration, or it is optional, or they are partly open primaries where you got to be in the party, or you got to be an independent, but you can't be of the other party, or it's like Baskin Robbins. There's a whole lot of flavors, if you will. But the one thing that I know for sure is the way, in my opinion, the way we do it now is the worst way because it's wide open for everybody. The most important thing that a political party can do is pick someone to represent them on the ballot, okay? Why is it then that we would open the door to every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the world whenever we go to do the most important thing that we can do? It makes no sense. No sense, absolutely. So, yes, absolutely, we're for that bill, be working to help support that bill. There are, I think, maybe one or two others that, if one can get more traction than the other, I want to go with whatever can actually move the ball forward. I would love to see closed primaries, though, in South Carolina, and actually, so whenever anybody registers to vote, that they would either be given the option of picking a party or having to pick a party in order, or choose an independent if they don't. Because in my opinion, whenever we choose our candidates, it ought to be Republicans who are choosing our candidates, period. Yes, sir. Oh. Yes,
Good
sir.
evening, Mr. McKissick.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
Roger Tasso from Liberty. Did Nancy Mace vote for Lynn Cheney when she ran for her House Republican leadership role? I heard she did.
That I do not know. I
Oh.
couldn't tell you, to be honest with you. I'm not sure.
Okay. Because Cheney voted for impeachment of Trump.
I know he did, and which he had a lot to say about when he called me on the phone. So 2 weeks ago, I'm sitting at home on my back porch. I'm sitting at home on my back porch 2 weeks ago, about 6 o'clock in the evening, and my cell phone rings. But up on my cell phone, it comes up, no caller ID available. So usually that's a reporter, and I don't take those calls. I decline them, or it's spam, so I hit decline. And about 2 minutes later, I get a text message from somebody that says, hey, my name's so-and-so. I work for 45. He's trying to call you. Like, okay, so I call this guy back, and he's like, yeah, that's President Trump. He's trying to call you. He's talking to some other state party chairman and other folks around the country. And this was about 3 or 4 days prior to the impeachment vote. Okay, to the impeachment trial in the Senate. And so about 10 minutes later, phone rings, and I said, hey, this is Drew. He said, Drew, it's your favorite president. How you doing? So we chat for about 15 minutes, and in the course of the conversation, Lynn Cheney's name came up, by the way. And he says, what is this? I got 45, won Wyoming by 45%. I'm more popular than she is in Wyoming. What's going through her head? But the bottom line with folks have asked a lot of questions, I think, of where the president's going and what he's thinking about doing right now. He is absolutely committed to staying involved in the Republican Party, advocating for Republican candidates in primaries in the next cycle in 22, and also for our candidates in the fall in 22. He since election day, has raised over $200 million. $200 million. And as I told somebody the other day, that buys a lot of jet fuel. He's going to be able to fly all around the country and show up in these primaries, and he's going to be able to help candidates in primaries and help them out in the general election. And that goes right back to the point we were talking about earlier about keeping those folks involved and keeping them in the party, and that's one of the ways we're going to help get that done.
Yeah, my name's Carl Hudson. I was county councilman last term, and I decided not to run for county council again. So I'm kind of new. Yeah. I'm kind of new to politics because I never considered myself a politician. But I've been a Republican my whole life. I didn't know it. I've always voted for Republican candidates because it's what I believe. Right. My problem is this. If you're going to run for election in Pickens County, you better have an R in front of your name because you're not going to get elected if you don't. Mm-hmm. That's how conservative we are. Mm-hmm. Our problem is a lot of people know this.
Yes.
And what do you do? I know you vote, you primary them, I know that. But most people don't take the time to really delve into what a candidate believes, core belief. What do you do when a liberal Democrat knows that, puts an R in front of his name, and runs for an election and votes like a Democrat? Where does the Republican Party, stand up and call them out? I think they should. If you're not being honest, now, that may sound divisive, but we have to stand up in America as Republicans and say what we believe, and people that don't believe like-minded, in other words, most of the time vote with the other party, we have to stand up and call that out. Right. And Pickens County, sometimes I feel like probably waste a lot of money up here because we're going to vote Republican. And the last elections and presidential elections has proven that. And what you said about Jamie Harrison, I mean, he could have bought votes, but it wasn't for sale.
People
wasn't for sale.
people weren't buying what he was selling. That was
That's
his
right.
problem.
We weren't for sale.
That's right.
And I wished everybody was like that. A lot of people, and it's good people, they say, well, you know, this guy sounds good. He's, you know, he's slick, but he goes to Columbia or goes to Washington, and he votes like a Democrat.
Right.
So who are you?
Yep. So, and again, that goes back to, I think, underline the importance of what we just talked about a minute ago when it comes to closed primaries, partisan voter registration. Goes to the heart of that. You know, what does the party do? What can the party do in cases like that? Well, you've got, you've got as a party organization the ability to speak out. You know, for one thing. And quite frankly, when party organizations do that, it may make it more difficult on someone trying to win re-election and win a primary the next time.
We got a couple more. I want to throw this
Okay.
in on that subject because it kind of gets in my wheelhouse here a little bit too. I've thought about what you said a lot. We are a one-party county. Right. The only way to get elected is to run as a Republican. Democrats don't even put anybody on the ballot here. And it's frustrated me for a long time. See, I have certified candidates as the party chairman. But as long as they pay the fee and they're old enough and they live here, I have to certify them. I don't have a choice. I can't say, no, you're not Republican enough. So the only solution I've been come up with, and I'm not saying I'm going to do this, but I'm going to put it in front of the executive committee. I think we need to start putting our name behind the Pickens County GOP, behind candidates, and have the people come in front of the executive committee here and talk to them and try to get their endorsement, and then we say whether or not, I mean, we had to certify them if they weren't on the ballot, but we can endorse. It's not, I wouldn't take it on myself, just as the chairman, to endorse anybody in a primary. But I don't see anything wrong with our executive committee interviewing candidates and then putting their stamp of approval on who they think would be the best for the job. That's the only thing I've been, does that sound reasonable to you folks?
Yeah, that's totally in your right to do that.
I'm sorry?
Totally in your right to do that.
So anyway, unless somebody can talk me out of it, Sir? Well, coming from you, I take that as high
Because
compliment.
going back to the part of your problem, what you mentioned just a minute ago, talking about filing, you know, and this goes back to actually a bill that we have let's see, it's in the House, I believe. This talking about the certification. So, you know, in a state where we don't register by party right now, up until and unless that changes, one of the other things that we've thought about pushing and actually have a bill to do this is to pattern a process after what they do in Tennessee. Tennessee doesn't register by party either. However, when candidates go to file to run, in order to be able to file to run, you have to have voted in at least 3 out of the last 4 primaries for that party. So, in other words, it's not as obviously severe as partisan registration and closing the primaries, but if I can't get that far, I would at least take this because it's better than what we have now. The party would have the option in this case of certifying someone if they didn't meet those qualifications if they wanted to. Like, say, for instance, we had a sheriff switch parties in Abbeville County. Solid conservative guy. Abbeville County's was Democrat forever, slowly changing position. Our county party folks love him. He comes to the meetings occasionally and so forth, and we convince him to switch parties. Well, he obviously wouldn't have voted in the last 3 or 4 Republican, but I would be able to certify him in that case. That would be your escape clause, if you will. But the point is that would at least give you some objective measure of whether these people are actually Republican or not. Because under current law, Jamie Harrison or Jim Clyburn could show up and file to run as a Republican for governor, and I can't legally do anything about it, which is ridiculous.
And the only flaw with that, I mean, I would be for that too. I wouldn't be against it. But in Pickens County, the Democrats vote in our primaries as a matter of course because they don't have a primary.
Right.
So they think they've got the right to come into our primary. Well, I've got to have the primary. Whoever wins the primary wins.
That's right.
So we've got a right to come in and vote in your primary because we get to choose who our representatives are going to be. It ain't it's not my fault that you don't have a strong enough party to field a candidate. Go home. This is Republican primary. That's
right.
my answer. But
Exactly.
But, Justin Alexander.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate your work on the heartbeat bill. That's obviously a critical, something that's very important to everyone in this room.
Thank you, sir.
I was very disappointed that the exemptions were left in, and I think we have to admit, like you say, we've got the votes there in the Senate, we've got the House votes. You know, it's overwhelming Republican majority, and so that those exemptions are left in is completely the fault of elected Republicans. And so I am glad that Heartbeat passed. I hope that the exemptions will quickly be stripped out and that personhood will be considered.
So what I think you're going to see, and you know, and again, Senator Rice can speak more to this than I can because he's in the Senate. Yeah, we did pick up 3 Republican members of the Senate, and that gets us ahead of cloture. You know, that in order to sit Democrats down. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we had 30 conservative pro-life senators in the Senate. And there are a few who would not support the bill unless it did have exceptions on it. And so I give an analogy that the president of South Carolina Citizens for Life, Lisa Van Riper, gave me. You know, that if someone came up and gave you the option of being able to save 97 out of 100 babies or 0 out of 100 babies, which one would you choose? Obviously, you want to choose the one to save 97 out of 100 babies. Again, is it perfect? No. And like it's, you know, I mean, when you look at, you know, our platform, for instance, you know, essentially goes back to that you know, unborn children should have rights under the 14th Amendment. That's been in our platform for, I think, probably 20 years or something like that. Do I want to see us get there? Yeah, I agree. But what we also do know right now is that bill did pass. It is the most pro-life bill that's ever been passed in the history of South Carolina, and it is now in federal court. And now, thanks to about 230 judges that have been added to the court under Donald Trump and 3 members of the Supreme Court, but really with a net pickup of 1 to 1.5 votes, depending on how you're counting some of those Supreme Court members. This bill does give us an opportunity to take those the new judiciary for a test drive on pro-life issues and see where we're going to end up. And you know, I'm hoping at the end of the day we're going to end up much better than where we are now. We'll find out where is the edge of the envelope that they're going to say it's okay for a state to do this and so forth when it comes to not exceptions but restrictions rather on abortion. But I agree with you on that. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Polly Keller. I'm up at Pumpkintown, and I have 2 major concerns about COVID. And the first one is, and I would just like you to give me some feedback of what South Carolina is doing in regards to these 2 topics. The first one is mandatory vaccines and masks. And as far as mandatory vaccines, I hear this being pushed around a lot, that we're not going to be able to go places, people aren't going to be able to go to work, travel, all of that kind of thing without taking mandatory vaccinations. So the right to refuse vaccine is, I'd like to know how South Carolina is approaching that, as well as the mask. There's lots of conflicting data. And even in Kentucky, Tom Massey has even talked about the miscommunications and the misrepresenting of data from the CDC and Dr. Fauci. And so that's my first question. And then my second question is on basically still on COVID, is the inability to get therapeutics prior to somebody getting really, really sick. Right. So that goes for hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, Regeneron, all of these drugs that are cheap, easy to get, and they're being prohibited, being distributed to the general public. So I find, for me, I think this is criminal, and I would like to know how South Carolina is approaching those 2 subjects.
All right, so respectfully on that, I am going to defer to Senator Rice because he is going to be more familiar with what the state is doing and the state's position on that and what's going on. Because, you know, from a government standpoint, I can't answer that question.
We do have a bill in the Senate right now. Now we haven't dealt on it yet, but we do have a bill in there that would make it voluntary, so that it won't be mandatory. Now, what we can't do where we're gonna have a problem is on a federal thing. So if the federal government comes out, and that's another issue, but if they come out and say, you've gotta have a vaccine, you've gotta have a certificate with you to fly on an airline, I mean, that's where we're gonna run into a problem on that.
That's where we'll end up in federal court before it's over.
That's
I'm sure.
correct. You know, we've got certain rights, and that's where we're gonna have to push back. We've got several bills in there dealing with executive orders coming down from Washington, and whether they're Second Amendment bills or federalism bills that say, you know, if you're gonna push something down to the state, that's the state's rights, we're gonna fight back with you on that, and that's on a lot of different issues. But what was the second part of that? Oh, the availability of. That's the, I mean, I'm telling you, there's a bill in there that basically says you can't make it mandatory. So we've got to get that passed. The second thing is availability of other therapeutics. And, you know, I can't tell you where that stands right now. I don't know that we've got a bill addressing that.
Well, Tom Massey from Kentucky has been pushing back on CDC and Fauci over that.
Yeah.
Is South Carolina doing the same?
That's the federal level. I don't know that I don't know where we stand on that, honestly. I'd like to be able to answer that question. I'll be glad to try to answer that question, but. How would
I find out? How would I find out in the future? These two are very dear to my heart here.
I don't know, but.
I'd like to know where we stand.
Almost everybody that we know that has contracted this virus, they get sent home. They do a test, they test positive, they just go home. And eventually, they get so sick, they end up in a hospital on a ventilator, where they could have been given something. And they don't even prescribe aspirin for these people. They just say, you're tested positive.
I'm aware of some cases where the medical professionals have allowed.
Well,
this to
I
occur.
also am aware that there's a lot of politics involved with the COVID right now, and that a lot of hospitals are being paid for COVID testing. The World Health has already switched as far as how they're doing the testing, which makes all the cases go down. So this has been a huge political agenda behind this, and to me, not treating people when there is something that will work, that they have multiple studies that they've used in Miami as well as in Virginia. They have all these programs, and they're not being used. People are going home and they're getting sick, and they're not being treated. And that to me is criminal. And I would really, and it's against informed consent, and it's against refusing treatment. And so I really want to know if we're going to push hard back on this.
Let me do this. I'm going to give you my card.
Okay.
And I will talk to our medical affairs committee.
His brother almost died. Now, he wasn't in South Carolina, but he almost died. It's at home, nothing.
Well, I'm aware of a case where we had something similar to that, and I got a call, and I actually intervened and talked to medical staff, and the individual, in lieu of being put on a ventilator, they came up with some other options and allowed him to go that route. And that honestly, I think that's.
And I realize this is a big issue, and they have big farmers in on it, and there's a lot of politics involved. But it's affecting everybody. It's affecting all of us, and it needs to be fixed.
Well, there's a lot of different opinions on that also. So you got medical staff pushing one way, and you're right. I mean,
In that case with South Carolina, do we have a right to try law? I know of other states that do have a right to try in case of a. Yeah, there is a federal. There was, but I haven't heard much about it in South Carolina.
I'm not sure.
Well, the right to try is when you're terminally ill and you're dying, then you can use something that you normally wouldn't be able to. It's not.
Once a patient's put on a ventilator
I
with
agree.
COVID, 80%.
Yeah, they're gone.
They don't make it.
I understand that. I'm not prepared tonight to answer those questions. I'll be glad to
I
try
appreciate
to find that out.
I really do, because it's important to me.
And we appreciate your concern. It affects all of us. I believe that wraps up the questions from the audience tonight.
Thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate it. And thank y'all for all that y'all do for the party.
This has been fun and informative. you guys are, look at you. Pickens County looking back at me. That's a pretty sight. Look at all of you turning out. Well, we've got room to social distance in here, and everything's nice and spread out. But it's still nice even under the pandemic and what's going on. You folks care enough about to show up, to come out here and be involved in your community. And since at the beginning this wasn't on tape, I'm going to stick it on the end here. Get involved. Go to our Facebook page, Pickens County GOP. It's not hard to find. There is a Pickens County in Georgia, so I always put the SC in there. But go there, and there's an explanation and an invitation to our reorganization. And I just found out today, got it nailed down, at our convention, which will be in April. It will be April 10th at 1 p.m. I don't have the location locked down yet. It will be. I'm trying to work it out to have it at a high school auditorium, so again, we'll have room to spread out. But our keynote speaker will be Congressman Jeff Duncan, which I'm proud to tell you he'll be coming. And but to come and see Congressman Duncan speak, you first need to go to Reorg and sign up for in your precinct reorganization and become a delegate to the convention. So show up on 1 month from tonight, on the 25th of March, and sign up and go into reorganization, become the president or executive committeeman of your precinct. Get your neighbors to come with you, become delegates to the convention, and then you get to vote for me or whoever wants to run against me, or for Justin or Amy, or for who we got secretary, who's going to be running for secretary. You get to participate and pick the leadership, and then you also get to vote on who will be going to Columbia to the state convention and vote for Drew, you know, and hear him speak down there. You'll be surrounded by 2,000 or 3,000 other Republicans, and any Republican in this state, just anybody, will be there. I'm sorry? Socially distanced. We will be there socially distanced. Alan has got his hand up. Would you like to say something, Alan?
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing, 'cause I'm not clear on it. You said executive committee person and president, but as long as you come and pay that $20, which is good for 2 years, even though you're not one of those, you still get a vote, right?
Oh, yeah. You get to vote at the, yeah, absolutely. If you come to Reorg and register, then you become eligible to become a delegate to the county convention and vote on everything that happens at the county convention. The only restriction on that would be each precinct has a specified number of delegates to the convention. But I have yet to see where we filled every spot in every precinct, so it'd be unusual that we fill them all and there'd be, you wouldn't get to. So like, one precinct, according to the size of it, will have 15 delegates, another one will have 20, another one might have 30, So you fill all the spots until they're full. But I don't think there'll be a problem with that. If you come, I can't absolutely guarantee it, because you never know who's going to show up and how many, but I would be surprised if everybody that shows up that wants to be a delegate to the convention isn't able to be one. Anything else? Anybody got a question on reorg? Well, at any rate, the dates again are March the 25th and April the 10th. On the 25th, we will be checking you in at the main entrance to this church, dividing up into 2 groups, one here and one in the main sanctuary. On April the 10th, be at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you will get to meet your congressman and shake his hand. So with that, God bless all of you. Pray for our country, pray for all of us, and pray for Donald Trump. And if there's a question about who the leader of the party is, whoever's asking you really hadn't been paying attention, 90% of the Republican Party supports Donald Trump. He is still the head of this party, and Mitch McConnell can go pound sand. CPAC is Sunday, and he will make his first public speech this Sunday afternoon at CPAC. Well, they will also honor another one of my heroes, Rush Limbaugh. God rest his soul. There'll never be another Rush. Let's go home, folks, and get some dinner. I'm hungry.